Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm 51. My husband and I have been married for almost 30 years. We live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio. Nice house, two-car garage, a yard that's too big now that the kids are gone, and silence. Lots of silence. When I think back to our early years road trips, late-night pancakes, the way he used to look at me across the table, it almost feels like someone else's life. These days, we barely speak. Dinner is 15 minutes of pass the salt, and then he disappears into ESPN and spreadsheets. I know he works hard. I know he's tired. But it's like I became part of the furniture. Our sons Daniel and Mark have their own lives now. One's in Denver, the other in Pittsburgh. They call when they remember. I don't blame them. 6 months ago, we moved into a brand new condo closer to the city. Modern, airy, and quiet. Too quiet. I thought the change of scenery would help. It didn't. Some mornings I wake up and feel like I'm floating in a glass box. I move, I breathe, I cook breakfast, I wash clothes, but no one really sees me. One Monday morning in March, I stood in front of my closet staring at clothes I hadn't touched in years. I chose a plain tracksuit and walked to the new fitness center 2 blocks away. I was nervous. At my age, the gym felt like a foreign country. But to my surprise, there were plenty of women like me, 45, 50 strong, real, with that quiet fire still burning behind their eyes. I started slow. Treadmill, stretching, water. A little yoga. It was something. 2 weeks passed. Then one day, as I stepped onto the leg press, I heard a voice beside me. "Morning. You're from Unit 402, right?" I turned and saw him. Tall. Fit. Maybe mid-50s. Soft gray t-shirt, light joggers. Kind eyes. Confident, but not in a showy way. "I'm Jake," he said. "I live across the hall. Unit 43. I think we're neighbors." I smiled. Just politely. But something fluttered inside me like someone had opened a window. From then on, I started noticing him more. Jake. Always calm. Always respectful. We crossed paths near the locker rooms, warmed up on mats near each other. He worked from home, an interior designer. Said his wife was living out of state for a while on a consulting contract. I didn't ask more than that. It felt safer not to. 3 weeks after that first hello, he stopped me after yoga. "If you ever feel like a good latte," he said, "there's this little coffee spot around the corner. Best one in the city. I go every Thursday." I hesitated. I wanted to say no, but instead I said, "Maybe." That Thursday, I wore a simple cream-colored dress with a belt and low heels, no perfume. But I did put on earrings for the first time in weeks. He was already seated near the window. He stood when I walked in. "I haven't had coffee with a man in almost 10 years, I joked as I sat down. He smiled. "I haven't had a conversation this easy in, I don't even know how long." We talked for 2 hours, laughed, shared stories. He didn't flirt. He listened. He saw me. When we stood to leave, he said one thing. "Lauren, you're very real. That's rare." As I walked home, cheeks still warm, I realized I hadn't felt that scene in years. But it was later that night, lying beside my husband in bed, the TV flickering blue across the ceiling, when it hit me like a wave. It wasn't love. It wasn't a crush. It was something more dangerous. I had remembered what it felt like to be alive. The following week, I found myself thinking about Thursday. Not about the coffee. About the way Jake looked at me when I spoke, as if every word mattered. Monday came and went. I folded laundry, ironed my husband's shirts, and cooked dinner like always. He came home late. Said work was crazy. We ate in silence, forks tapping ceramic, the hum of the fridge louder than our words. Tuesday, I returned to the gym. I wore the same black leggings I always did, but added a loose lavender top. Just for color. For something different. Jake was there. On the rowing machine this time. He waved but didn't approach. That made me like him more. On my way out, I caught him near the exit. No coffee this week, he asked, gently teasing. I didn't say no, I replied, surprising myself. He smiled and nodded, then stepped aside to hold the door open. By Thursday, I had planned my outfit like it was an accident. A soft blue wrap blouse, simple jeans, nude flats. I applied mascara. Just one coat. We sat at the same cafe. Same table. He ordered an iced chai. I stuck with my latte. This time we talked about music. About how when we were younger songs had meaning. He said he still made playlists, that he believed the right song at the right moment could change a whole day. I told him about the Alanis Morissette CD I used to blast in my car when I was 25, and angry at the world. I'd love to see that side of you, he said with a grin. The rebel. Maybe she's still in there, I said. His eyes crinkled with warmth. I think she is. That evening, as I loaded the dishwasher, I hummed under my breath. My husband glanced over. You're in a good mood. Just a nice day, I said, placing the last mug inside. He nodded but didn't ask more. The next few days passed in that same strange in-between. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I was aware of my heartbeat more than usual. I felt noticed, and worse, wanted to be noticed again. Jake and I didn't text. He didn't push for more. It was just Thursdays. That's all. Until the fourth Thursday. We walked together afterward just 2 blocks. He mentioned a park near the river. Said the walking path was beautiful in the evening. If you ever feel like a walk, he said, then quickly added, no pressure. I didn't answer right away. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin shadows above me, I whispered aloud to the dark, I do. The following week after our coffee, we didn't say it, but we both headed toward the park. It was still light out, golden hour, brushing the trees with warmth. We didn't walk fast. Didn't talk much either. Just moved side by side like it was the most natural thing. Halfway through the loop, he asked, what do you miss most? From before life got quiet. I took a long breath. Being looked at. Really looked at. Like I'm not just filling space. Jake stopped walking. You are not space filler, Lauren. I turned toward him, and for a brief second the wind caught my hair and pulled it across my face. He reached up and brushed it away slowly. His fingers lingered just long enough for my pulse to jump. We said nothing after that. Just finished the loop and parted at the corner. But that night, I opened my dresser drawer, took out a pair of amber earrings I hadn't worn in years, ones I used to wear when I still felt beautiful. I set them beside my perfume bottle on the counter. No reason. Or maybe every reason. The next Thursday, I told myself I wouldn't go. I made tea at home, cleaned out the pantry, even went through old photo albums hoping to feel grounded. But by 4:30 I was slipping on the same wrap blouse from the week before and walking toward the cafe like I didn't have a choice. Jake was already there. Same table, same smile. He didn't say anything when I sat down. Just handed me a small to-go cup with a sticky note attached. Thought you might want to walk again. The note said, sunset waits for no one. I laughed before I could stop myself. And just like that, we were on the path again. This time we talked about the little things, his failed tomato garden, the dog he had growing up, my youngest son's obsession with baseball cards when he was 10. I hadn't talked that much in weeks, maybe months. As we reached a small overlook by the water, Jake paused. Can I ask you something, he said. I nodded. What's the loneliest part of being married? I was quiet. The wind was soft. The water below us still. Not being touched, I said. Not in a physical way. Just no hand on my back when I'm tired. No kiss on the forehead. No warmth. He didn't answer. Just stepped a little closer. We didn't touch, not yet, but our arms almost grazed. You deserve that, he whispered. His voice was low. Real. I turned to him, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of what he saw. I felt seen. When we parted that evening, he didn't ask to see me again. He just looked at me for a long moment and said, "Be gentle with yourself." I carried those words with me all the way home. That night, my husband fell asleep early on the couch, remote in hand, television buzzing softly. I watched him for a while. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't even distant in a mean way. He was just gone, like someone slowly fading out of a picture. I went to the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and opened the drawer. The amber earrings, the perfume, the silk camisole I hadn't worn in over a year. I put all three on, for myself, just to see. The woman in the mirror wasn't young, but she wasn't invisible either. She had a softness to her mouth, a depth in her eyes. She wasn't a ghost. 2 days later, Saturday morning, I ran into Jake again. Not at the cafe, not on the street, but at the gym. We hadn't crossed paths there in a while. He was at the water fountain. I was walking out of the locker room. He smiled but didn't say anything, just offered me a bottle of cold lemonade from the vending machine. "Hot today," he said. "Thanks," I said, trying not to blush. We sat outside on a bench near the back exit where no one usually went. A breeze moved through the leaves overhead. I broke the silence first. I thought we were pretending like nothing happened. Jake looked straight at me. "I don't pretend well," he said. "But if you want me to disappear, I will." I shook my head, maybe too quickly. "No, don't." He looked down, nodding, and I saw a kind of quiet relief in his shoulders. We didn't talk much after that. But as I stood to leave, his eyes followed the edge of my sleeve, the line of my wrist. Not in a way that was hungry, but in a way that made me feel known. As I walked home, I realized something terrifying. I was in a game I didn't want to stop playing. Not because it was thrilling, but because for the first time in years it felt like I was waking up. By mid-June, the heat pressed down like a thick curtain. Even at night, the air felt heavy. Our windows stayed cracked open, fans humming in every room. My husband worked later than usual that week. He barely looked up from his phone during dinner. When he finally spoke, it was only to mention a business trip he had coming up. 2 nights in Cincinnati. "Don't wait up," he said. I nodded. There was nothing left to say. The next day, I saw Jake again. We hadn't planned it. We never did. That was the unspoken rule. If it happened, it happened. He was walking his bike near the river trail. I had stopped by the farmer's market for peaches. We saw each other from across the street. He crossed without hesitation. "Do you have time?" he asked. I didn't answer with words. I simply turned and began walking, and he followed beside me. The trail was mostly empty. Couples on benches, joggers in headphones, a dog chasing nothing. He told me about a project he'd been working on, a lakeside renovation for a retired couple who wanted more color in their life. "Funny, isn't it?" he said. "At a certain age, we start realizing we've made everything beige and forget why." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. Maybe because beige had taken over my own life too. We passed a small footbridge. Beyond it, an open meadow with tall grass swaying like waves. There was a picnic table under an old oak tree. Empty. "Want to sit?" he asked. I nodded. My palms were sweating. We sat quietly for a while. He didn't reach for me, didn't touch my hand. Instead, he looked out at the sky and said, "I used to believe life got smaller with age, that we were meant to just settle." And now I asked. Now I think we shrink only if we let ourselves. I didn't reply. The weight of his words sat between us. Then softly he said, "You make me feel like I haven't missed it. Like there's still time." It was too much. Too close. I stood suddenly. "I should go," I said. "I have to make dinner." He didn't stop me, just nodded. "I'll walk you back." We didn't speak as we crossed the bridge again. But when we reached the end of the path, he gently touched my elbow, barely a whisper of a touch, and asked, "Would you ever want to get out of town just for the day? No plans, just somewhere we don't have to think so much." I froze. This was it. This was no longer a walk. No longer coffee. No longer just passing time. This was the edge. And I was standing on it. My mouth opened before my mind could stop it. Where? There's a lake about an hour from here. Quiet. I used to go there when I needed space. I hesitated. My heart was loud. Too loud. Okay, I whispered. He smiled, but it wasn't triumphant. It was gentle, almost grateful. I'll pick you up Saturday morning, if the weather's good. It will be, I said. I can feel it. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling while my husband snored beside me. I thought about the oak tree, the sunlight on his face, the way his voice lowered when he said my name. I didn't know what would happen at the lake, but I knew something had already shifted, and there was no going back. Saturday morning arrived like a whisper. I woke up early before the alarm before my husband stirred. The sky outside our bedroom window was soft gray, but the forecast promised sun. In the bathroom, I brushed my hair into a low ponytail, careful, deliberate. I chose a cream-colored sundress with thin straps. Light enough for the heat, modest enough for the story I'd told meeting an old friend for the day. He didn't ask who. By 9:00 a.m., Jake's silver SUV pulled up outside. He didn't honk, just waited. Patient. When I opened the door, he stepped out and smiled. Not wide, not eager, just warm. Familiar. Like someone welcoming you home after a long trip. You look peaceful, he said. I'm trying, I replied. The drive was quiet at first. The kind of quiet that's not awkward, just full. He played a playlist filled with 90s songs, half of which I hadn't heard in years. When a track by Natalie Imbruglia came on, I caught myself mouthing the lyrics. Jake glanced over. I knew you knew this one. We both laughed. The lake was just as he described, hidden, still surrounded by trees that danced gently in the breeze. There was a narrow dock and an old wooden boathouse, faded and leaning with time. We walked along the water's edge, our sandals brushing against dry grass. The sun climbed higher, casting gold over everything. This place used to feel like an escape, he said. Does it still? He looked at me. Only when I'm not here, alone. We sat on a low bench beneath a tree. My bare knees touched his jeans. Neither of us moved away. I let the silence settle between us like a soft quilt. Then I asked the question I hadn't dared voice before. Do you ever feel guilty? He didn't look away. Every day, he said. But I also feel alive. And I don't think those things cancel each other out. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. He reached over slowly and ran one finger along the edge of my wrist. A small gesture, tender. It made my skin hum. You have beautiful hands, he said. Not because of how they look, but because they move like you've spent a lifetime holding everyone else up. My throat tightened. I turned my hand over in his. He held it like it was something delicate, something sacred. We sat like that for a long time. Later, we dipped our feet in the water from the dock. He told me stories about failed projects, design clients who drove him mad, and the strange ache of sleeping alone in a house built for two. When the sun began to lower, we packed up and started back toward the car. The air smelled of pine and warm stone. Just before we left, he turned to me beside the open passenger door. If I kissed you right now, would you pull away? I didn't speak. Instead, I stepped forward. He leaned down, slow, careful. And when his lips touched mine, it wasn't fire, it was something softer. Like a match being struck in a quiet room. Gentle heat. No rush. Just breath and truth. I didn't pull away. When we parted, he searched my face. You okay? I'm not sure, I said. But I don't want to pretend I didn't feel that. On the drive home, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The sun dipped behind the trees. The world kept turning. But inside me, something had changed shape. And it wasn't going back. Sunday morning, the kitchen smelled like toast and quiet. My husband sipped coffee, scrolling through emails. He mentioned something about quarterly reports and a broken printer. I nodded, placed his plate down, and smiled out of habit. But inside, I was still on the dock, still barefoot in the sun, still feeling the brush of Jake's lips and the echo of his question, "Would you pull away?" That evening, as I folded laundry, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Shirt sleeves, rolled hair, pinned loosely, bare feet on hardwood. And I saw it. Something had returned to my face. Not youth, not beauty, presence. I looked like someone awake. The next few weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Familiar on the surface, gym, groceries, dinner, but underneath a pulse I couldn't ignore. A secret current. Jake and I didn't meet at the lake again. Not yet. Instead, we met in quiet places. A bookstore tucked away downtown. A bench behind the library. A corner of the botanical gardens where no one looked twice at a man and woman sitting close, talking in low tones. We didn't cross any more lines, but every conversation felt like stepping closer to the edge. He told me about his parents, both gone now, about the loneliness that settled in once their house was emptied, about how silence in a home could feel louder than shouting. I told him about the early years of my marriage, the road trips, the first apartment, the way my husband used to place his hand on the small of my back when we crossed the street. Jake listened. Always listened. One afternoon, we sat in his car during a storm. Rain streaked down the windshield like melted glass. Neither of us moved to leave. He looked at me and said, "I don't need answers. I just need you to be honest with yourself." That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too still. My husband breathed beside me, deep and even. The ceiling fan hummed like a lullaby I no longer believed. At 2:12 a.m., I slid out of bed and walked to the living room. I opened the window. The summer wind moved through the screen like a sigh. Then came the voice I hadn't expected. From behind me. "Is there someone else?" I turned. My husband stood in the hallway, shirt wrinkled, hair tousled. His eyes were tired but alert, more awake than I'd seen in years. "What makes you ask that?" I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged. "You're different. It's in your eyes." I looked at him for a long moment. At the man I'd once run through rainstorms with. At the man who now barely noticed when I wore perfume. "I don't know what to say," I said. He nodded, stepped into the living room, and sat on the couch. "Do you love him?" "I don't know if it's love," I said. "But it's real." And it made me realize how much of myself I'd buried just to keep everything okay. He didn't flinch, just stared at his hands. "You're not angry?" I asked. "No," he said. "Just sad. Maybe I should have noticed sooner. Maybe we both let it get too quiet." The rain had stopped. The wind eased. I stood there barefoot watching him sit in silence, my husband, the man who once told me I was his home. Now we were just two people in a house surrounded by memories and missing pieces. I didn't say anything else, but I knew something had just cracked open, and once it did, there was no putting it back. The morning after that conversation, I woke up before dawn. I sat on the edge of the bed listening to the soft rhythm of my husband's breathing. He hadn't touched me during the night. We hadn't said goodnight. But there was no anger in the air, only something heavier. Resignation, maybe, or the weight of truths that had arrived too late. By 8 a.m., he left for the office. I stood by the kitchen window holding my coffee mug with both hands staring at nothing. My reflection ghosted faintly in the glass, and I whispered without even meaning to, "I don't know who I am here anymore." Later that afternoon, I packed a small overnight bag. Just clothes for a couple of days. My amber earrings, a silk scarf, a well-worn paperback. I left a note on the counter: "I'm staying at a friend's. I need time to think. L." He didn't call, he didn't text, and strangely, I didn't expect him to. I booked a small studio rental on the edge of town just outside Columbus near a quiet, tree-lined road. The space was simple: wood floors, white walls, a window that looked out onto a garden of overgrown lavender. I unpacked, slowly. One sweater, one dress, my notebook. When I opened it, I found a line I had scribbled weeks ago without really noticing. I missed the sound of my own thoughts. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I lit a candle, made tea, sat cross-legged on the bed, and just listened. To nothing. To everything. The next morning, I texted Jake. "Lauren, I left the house." His reply came fast. "Jake, do you need anything, Lauren?" "Just air." That afternoon he came by. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring wine. He brought a small plant in a ceramic pot and placed it on the windowsill. "It likes morning light," he said. "Figured it'd fit here." He didn't try to touch me. Didn't move too close. Instead, we sat on the floor, backs against the wall, knees slightly touching. I told him everything. About the conversation with my husband, the sadness, the numbness, the fear of being selfish, and the deeper fear of disappearing again. He listened with his whole body, no interruptions, no advice. When I finished, he reached over and took my hand. "Whatever you choose, choose it fully," he said. "Even if it hurts. Even if it's messy." His fingers interlaced with mine. "And whatever part of you woke up this summer, don't let her fall asleep again." That night after he left, I stood barefoot on the cold tile of the kitchen, the plant sitting quiet on the windowsill. I ran my fingers along the edge of the counter, tracing nothing. Then I whispered to the dark, "I'm still here." The next morning, I called my husband. He answered on the second ring. "I'm not coming back," I said gently. "At least, not in the way we were." There was silence. Then he replied, "I figured." "I'm not angry at you," I added. I lost myself trying to hold on to us." "I know," he said. "And I think I lost you while thinking we were fine. We didn't cry. We didn't beg. We just sat there, each on our end of the line. Two people who once held everything together, now learning how to let go without breaking." That evening, Jake texted again. "Jake, you don't owe me anything. But if you want to come over tomorrow, I'll cook." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "Only if you let me bring dessert." Sunday arrived with golden light, the kind that slips through window blinds like forgiveness. I wore a linen dress, soft slate blue, hair half up, no makeup, just lip balm and the amber earrings. I walked to Jake's place, a small rental on the edge of downtown tucked between a music store and a flower shop. The door was slightly ajar. I knocked anyway. He opened it with a quiet smile. "You came. You said there'd be food." Inside, the kitchen smelled like garlic and fresh herbs. On the counter, 2 wine glasses, a bowl of olives, a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel like it had just come from someone's grandmother's oven. We didn't rush. We ate on the patio, knees touching under the table. The city hummed in the distance, buses, voices, dogs barking somewhere far. After dessert, peach cobbler I'd bought from a roadside stand, he took my plate, rinsed it, and didn't say a word. Later, we sat on the old leather couch. He reached for my hand. No questions, no pressure, just presence. I leaned into him slowly, not because I was trying to escape anything, but because I wasn't. His lips touched my forehead, my cheek, the curve of my shoulder, and finally my mouth. There was no rush, no firestorm, just warmth and a knowing. That night, we didn't make love out of need. We just lay together, quiet, breathing, real. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the sound of someone who had waited not for permission, but for honesty. The next morning, I woke up before him. I sat up, pulled the blanket around me, and looked out the window. Birds were circling near the power lines. I walked into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and faced myself. And I saw her. The woman I thought I'd buried under routines and meal plans and silence. She looked tired, yes, but alive. A little wild around the eyes. And deeply hers. There were no decisions that day. No big speeches. No boxes to unpack or papers to sign. But something had already shifted for good. That evening I returned to the studio apartment. I made tea, lit a candle, pulled out my notebook, and I wrote one line at the top of the page she didn't leave to find someone else. She left to find herself, and that was enough. A few weeks later, I ran into my husband at the grocery store. We stood by the apples, awkward and polite. He asked how I was. I said better. He nodded, then added, "You look like you." I smiled. Maybe for the first time in years. That night, Jake and I walked to the overlook by the river. The wind was stronger now. Fall was coming. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and I rested my head against him. "I don't need forever," he said. "Just real." I looked up at him. "I can give you that." And as we stood there, the leaves beginning to shift, the city lights flickering awake below, I finally understood I hadn't escaped anything. I had returned. To breath. To skin. To my own life. And I wasn't afraid to live it anymore.